Welcome to the Water Walkers podcast. Every Christ follower experiences moments like Peter when Jesus called him out of the boat to walk on the water. This podcast can encourage other leaders as they learn to follow the voice of Jesus as Peter did. Today, I'm excited to welcome a special guest and my friend Dee Brown from Little Rock, Arkansas. Dee has over 30 years of experience in engineering and business leadership. He co-founded Brown Engineers, an electrical, mechanical, and automation engineering consulting firm in Little Rock, Arkansas. And Dee does a great job of giving practical understanding to the kingdom business mindset. Dee is an experienced and successful business leader who really prioritizes God's kingdom, and he's very strategic and methodical about the way he goes about his business. He does diligent research in pursuit of finding the greatest impact. Dee also loves the local church. He serves as an elder in his church and as a board member of our city church network here in Arkansas. And he's constantly serving his community with great care and compassion. God has used Dee to encourage many business leaders in Arkansas. So I'm excited to get to share that encouragement with you today. I hope you enjoy this conversation. So welcome, Dee Brown. I am so thankful to have you on this podcast. After even just the very first episode, as I started to think about potential guests that I would want to have on the podcast, you were an early name on the list for sure. I have, like I mentioned in the introduction, just had the privilege to see you work and see God work through you. And your stories have really encouraged me and have encouraged other people across Arkansas as well. And so I'm just happy to get to be here with you, to share that with more people, and even just to give God glory for what he's done and what he's doing still in your life. So it's my privilege to have you on here. Thank you for taking some time to jump in with me. And just as we get started with the conversation, we always start with an icebreaker question just to get the ball rolling and help people kind of get to know you a little bit. So the icebreaker question that we picked just to get started is, what animal do you most identify with and why?
Well, thanks, Logan. It's great to be here. What animal do I most identify with? I think I would pick a bull. I had to think about that for a second. I thought it was probably because we have some red Devon cattle here at the ranch, and bulls can be very quiet but yet strong. And so, we have to pay close attention to those animals and for characteristics for breeding, what you want them to reproduce. You start to notice little details of muscle tone and body shape and what you plan for several generations down the line. I think those traits are, extremely important. And the bulls also make me think of bull markets, which is what you want when you see the markets moving up and to the right, kind of the opposite of what we're seeing right now. But that would be my answer on the animal.
Awesome. That's a good answer. That's a very thoughtful answer, especially with the ranching that you do. That's kind of a fun thing. I think it took me a while of knowing you to even realize that you had cattle. And eventually when I finally got out to your house and saw.
It's a little known secret.
Yes, but what an awesome one. It's just like all the things you do always was blowing my mind. But so the next question, what we were going to talk about is, having done business for 30 years, you're 30 years in and you've seen some stories, you've seen some things, and you've gotten to interact with a lot of businesses and go through a lot of different situations. And I wonder if you could just explain for those watching, for their benefit, how you initially connected with God's heart for business and God's heart for your business, and maybe a little bit of that growth process of understanding that better.
Yeah, I so appreciate that question because as an engineer, I started out in a very technical oriented role with engineering and technology. And over time, I began to see the importance of like things like growing and scaling a business and how that required more people, more talent to be able to do that, especially like-minded people who could help accomplish, the task at hand, the project, the mission. So over time, I began to look more into what does human flourishing look like? What's God's purpose for business? So that's always been a kind of an interest of mine. And especially when you start to apply how Christians throughout history have changed, they've, improved culture for the good for everyone, and how creating jobs, puts food on the table for workers and families. And so God created all of that before the fall is a very good thing. But when we look at creation, fall, redemption, the restoration process, and sometimes I think we tend to focus on the fall of why things are broken, why are things so bad or the way that they are. I think the redemption that Jesus offers, sometimes we fail to look at the scope or the large mission of what he's doing there. And if we could have the imagination to know more about what that restoration can look like today, I think business goals and the way that God calls us into work actually fits into all of that. And so, even in a very, like I said, a technologically oriented world, continue to think about how does all that fit together? What does that mean? Today we live in one of the most complex economic times ever. This is global economy,
Yeah.
supply chain issues, technology disruptors, and so we do tend to rely on science and medical and technology to provide the next round of relief or what have
Yeah.
you. And so, someone who's been in the engineering world, I can see where it's very easy for us to rely on those things. But I remembered a quote from Dr. John Hanna. He said, "Theology used to be the queen of all the sciences."
Mm.
And so that's how people for hundreds of years thought about the world and how we operate in that. But today the culture wants to tell us that our faith is supposed to be, well, just personal and private. Keep that to
Yeah.
yourself, bring that out into the public square. And that's not how Jesus taught his followers to live. That's not how Christians made a difference by hiding the light. They had to live it out. And so I continue to think about how do we apply that even in modern business environments. It can be intentional and practical. And so that's just a little bit of a kind of the history of how I've been thinking about that. And I think one last point on that that's really important is we all spend more time doing work than probably any other area of our life,
Yeah.
but yet we tend to look for meaning in life anywhere else but work. And so,
Hmm.
like, how do we reconcile those issues? How can we recover meaning and purpose in what we get to do on a daily basis?
Yeah. One of the things I appreciate about you, and of course, as an engineer, and probably some of the people listening can already catch on to this. As an engineer, you are a very strategic thinker, and thinking strategically about how business is positioned in the world to be useful for the kingdom of God and how God works and moves through business, that there is a connection there. And I've seen you demonstrate that with what you do. I've seen you teach on that. I've seen you really live that out. And that's one of the things I've so appreciated about you because of the way your mind is wired as an engineer and a strategic thinker. It seems like God has really shown you a little bit. It's almost an expression of God's strategic thinking about business as a kingdom enterprise kind of thing. And I just really appreciate that. That's been a huge encouragement to me over my years. And one of the things too that I think we all can learn from are those strategic thinkers who can see how business fits into God's kingdom strategy as part of the broader kingdom and the broader church and the broader movement of God. Um, it's neat to see too that you've spent the time to really be diligent and growing in that and researching that and even walking that out in your own business and even what you've been doing lately. I know over the years, God has stirred some specific passions in you, given you some strategic thinking, and you've been recently kind of working toward a transition that is going to position you to better pursue that passion and kind of pursue this understanding that God has really deposited in you. And so I wonder, could you just walk us through a little bit, again, 30 years of engineering and business and kind of the transition of kind of how that's playing out lately and how you're applying this wisdom?
Yeah, yeah. I'd love to unpack that a little bit. I mentioned earlier developing these healthy cultures in our work environment is something that kind of always intrigued me. And that's not an area that you really ever study in school, certainly not in a technical, trade like I'm in. And so it's something you just develop by trial and error as you go. And I continued to think about how can we as business leaders navigate these times, this cultural moment that we find ourselves in today. And so I was searching for, better ways of doing that. What tools are out there? What kind of networking and groups? And that's when I came across this thing called C12. And I
Yeah.
just thought that was the perfect environment for it. It's a place where Christian CEOs and business owners can work together really on all aspects of life. and you may not find that in other other types of secular business groups. You can get great business advice there, but where are you going to get to work on all the areas of life together? So that's where I found that working on those domains can really add so much to our business, because going back to the culture question that we were talking about earlier. So that's what C12's mission is, to equip Christian CEOs and business owners to build these great businesses, but with greater purposes in mind. And so it integrates that culture by really satisfying some of our deepest longings that we can do when we're doing work. And so that's where I felt God's calling was for stewarding our business as well, and helping other business owners, be able to do that. So, if I could just share the C12 doctrinal statement for a second, it's not a long statement. But it's really interesting when you think about, the fact that we just say Jesus Christ is Lord. The whole Bible is wholly true. God has an eternal plan for each believer's life, and that plan includes their business. And so nobody ever has a problem with those first three statements about Jesus, Bible, and eternal plan. But when you say, but that plan includes their business, it almost stops some people in their tracks to go, well, what does that look like? That's really interesting. And so that was one of the things that caught my attention with C12, one of the largest Christian business networks in the country, with over 3,500 members. But those member CEOs and business owners employ about 1 million people, and then with family, vendors, business relationships, that's probably 10 million people impacted by what C12 is doing around the country.
Wow.
But Logan, one of the interesting things to me was, and so all of our neighbors around us, cities have hundreds of members there, but that's one of the things that compelled me then to want to launch C12 here and be, a curator and one of the best providers of goods and services for our customers who want to create great working environments. And I'll just share too, I think we don't want to prescribe what you do in your business. That's between, and you and God, but we are going to give you 1,000 great ideas on how you can apply some of these things in your business, and then let you and God go work on that together. So that's the cool part of it.
Yeah, C12 is a fascinating ministry and resource for Christian business leaders. And like you said, a massive network with 3,500 already involved and in places all across the country, and all these wonderful connections. Now, again, you've had both 30 years of experience of interacting with business leaders over the years, and you've got this network of now C12 people that you're involved with. Again, it's a network that I greatly respect and really appreciate what they're doing. So I wonder, in those connections and those relationships and some of the things that you've seen with all the people you've gotten to interact with, what are some of the major challenges that you've seen for business leaders as they work to apply their faith at work?
Oh man, there's so many issues that come to mind with that question. Everybody's facing. There's a lot that's being asked of owners, and some of that's just tendency toward burnout and just overwork and all that goes with running a business. But you're specifically asking about applying faith at work, and I think, man, the first couple of questions that come to mind are like, well, can we do this? I mean, is this even legal? Well, if it is okay, then won't this hurt the bottom line? So those are natural questions that come into this question about, doing like business and ministry. How does that even work together? I didn't go into business to be thinking about ministry. That's probably for some nonprofit out there, not for me.
Yeah.
But when people begin to actually pause and think about how this works and what it means, they can begin to understand some of the benefits of how this works in their business, and it can actually be a wise business move. And so a couple things that come up, are how do I deal with the demographic shifts associated with the different generations that are coming to work today? Different age groups approach things very, very differently. But I think the bottom line question we have to ask ourselves, what we wrestle with here, is how will I develop a company culture with how am I going to do that without addressing real meaning and purpose in people's lives? So when we can begin to connect that real meaning and purpose is what drives culture. that actually helps people succeed, and it really
Yeah.
motivates them to want to be part of a larger team of doing great things together. Giving that little bit extra when we've got to hit this deadline or this project. And so the meaning and purpose question is really what we kind of have to get back to when we start asking these questions about faith at work.
Yes, that your business is connected to a greater purpose than just the spreadsheets or, some of those more monotonous parts of work. That's
Right.
really insightful. I appreciate that. So here's another question though. With this same network, kind of addressing those same interactions that you get to have, are there some neat examples of kingdom impact that you've seen?
Yeah. Even in my last 6 to 12 months of this new phase of the journey that I'm on, it's been really encouraging to see hundreds, literally hundreds of case studies that we get to share as part of this larger network of C12. Stories of both publicly owned and private owned businesses who've integrated faith in business, businesses
Wow.
from 5 to 10 employees or 100 employees or even 10,000 employees.
Wow.
When we realize that we're really all in the people business, then at our forums together, we see that levels the playing field, and we're all solving the same kind of problems together. So a lot of those. Maybe I could just give you two really quick story examples of something that I think's been encouraging.
Yeah.
First one of those is from Coca-Cola Consolidated Bottling Company over in Atlanta. They developed an entire department within their company that's composed of their leadership team, their human resources, and legal. And they really worked hard at developing their mission and vision. They call it their T Factor team or Transformation Factor team.
Yeah.
You can see that, look that one up online. When they worked on their mission and vision together, and they came up with these four criteria of honoring God, serving others, doing everything with excellence, and then growing profitably. And that's the values that they put together. They've actually published that in a book earlier this year. It's called The
Yeah.
Transformation Factor. And so that's a fascinating story on how they did that. Today they're at 16,000 employees across 14 states. It's a phenomenal story. And so if you can figure out how to honor God while making soda drinks and growing a company of 16,000 employees, I think
Yeah.
we can figure out how to honor God in our businesses as well. So theirs is a
Wow.
great. There's another one out there, a company called Polydeck. They're a manufacturer of screening equipment for the mining industry, and they have customers all over the entire world. Their owner reworked their mission, vision, and values, and he put it on the employees on everybody's business cards, his included, but all the employees got new business cards and had their mission, vision, and values written on the back of the card. And so when the sales team who operated on a commission basis and they feared the worst, like, oh my goodness, how is this going to affect our business to have these Christian values written on directly on the front the back of our cards? And they literally even thought the owner must have lost his mind. This is not going to
Wow.
be a business idea. But as they processed that together in their team, they thought once they got over that initial fear of how this might impact their business, as they read and reread the card, they noticed something here. There was nothing on the card in Polydeck's Christian expectations of their customers or even their employees. That all of those expectations and their mission, vision, values, they were directed at how Polydeck would perform. And
Hmm.
so those core values was really a simple statement of how Polydeck was going to treat other people, both inside and customers outside the company. Is a really fascinating experience. And so their story is also captured in a book. It's called the Business Card. I happen to have that one sitting right here on my desk. But
Yeah.
the Business Card is a really short story of Polydeck story is a really good one because it kind of helps people see some of the good and some of the bad of what they had to work through in that as they put their faith out there, but ultimately the good that came from it in their story. So Coca-Cola, Polydeck, two great ones.
Yes, those are great examples. I actually had the privilege of participating in a T Factor. I've got a little Coke bottle from that with my name on it that I received from that. That was a remarkable experience, and what they've done there is so neat. And then if you're listening to the podcast, D actually had a copy of the book that he put on the camera, so you can actually see it in the video version if you want to click in the show notes, or I might be able to include a link to that in the show notes on the podcast. But those are great examples, T Factor and Polydeck. Awesome. Thank you for sharing those. Well, before we get to the end of our time, we've been talking a little bit about C12. I love the resource that this is to business leaders so they can find it as a right fit for them. What would be some ways that you would encourage people who want to explore a little bit more about C12?
Yeah. Well, that's almost like saying, what kind of book would you recommend for me to just solve all my problems in business?
Sure.
There would be so many answers there. It would be so broad, and it would probably be vague and may or may not connect with you.
Sure.
Um, but but if I could imagine, if I could just share this, if we were sitting down together over a cup of coffee or tea, and I could really kind of better understand where you are in your journey with both your business and your faith journey, kind of what things are on your mind at this stage of life or particular point in your business, then it would, in 5 or 10 or 15 minutes, it would be so much easier to be more specific and helpful in those answers.
Yeah.
But what I would share, I think, is this thought that's really been helpful to me. And it's that my hope is, being able to connect with folks is because of the depth of the tools, of the processes is so large. Just kind of keep these things in mind. Every leader needs three things. They need a page, a person, and a plan. A page is a place to journal and reflect on what God's telling you as you steward and lead in the business and in the place of influence that God has given to you.
Yeah.
So that's a page. That's really just a place to begin to ask, what is God telling you to do with that as you steward your business? The second is a person, and we're really a group of persons, like the right peer group. And it's amazing what can happen if you have a third person that's kind of interjected into a closed system. So you begin to get peer advice and listen and ask questions together as you process. So having a group of Christian business owners and peers is an amazing part of the process of what we do.
Yeah.
So a page, a person, and a plan. The third one being a plan. And that's really a strategic plan, but maybe even more specifically, one that's developed around a proven framework of business development so that you make sure you're covering all the aspects of your business, including your culture and your ministry options of how you're thinking about operating in the world. So that plan is really kind of an operating system to make sure that you're looking across, all of those areas of the business. And so a faith-based group like C12 helps develop that mission, vision, and core values that begin to guide you in those areas we include things like finances, revenue generation, organizational development, operations management, as well as businesses ministry. So there are other systems out there that address, all kinds of, business things, but I really value what we're doing at C12 because of the meaning and purpose in life that drive and motivates us as humans to really promote human flourishing. So my challenge would be for you to think about those things, and the only competition we have out there is the status quo. That's the thing we have to overcome is, do I want to be a better leader? Can I be a better husband, dad, family member? And then how does that flow into my business and begin to say, okay, those same dynamics play out here, maybe in a larger setting, but in ways where, okay, I've got to get over the status quo and get engaged here and figure out what God's wanting me to do with that. So that'd be my encouragement for you, would be a page, a person, and a plan.
A page, a person, and a plan. That is like gold to help people along their journey. Really appreciate that. If you want, I know people can reach out to you, D Brown. I know you're on LinkedIn, but is there any other way if somebody wanted to grab a coffee or a tea with you and dive a little deeper into that you want to share for people to be in touch?
Yeah, I mean, the dee.brown at c12forums.com is out there. We're also pretty prominent on LinkedIn. There's also a C12 Arkansas LinkedIn page. So you can see some regular updates there. And then just the website at joinc12.com, so you can see where C12 forums are in your area.
Yeah, so, and if you're watching on the screen, I'll put dee.brown at c12forums.com, and then that website, joinc12.com. So that's great. Dee, I really appreciate you being on. Again, it's always inspiring for me to get to hear from you and just the insight that you have as a strategic thinker and just what the Lord has shown you and even the season that you're in right now and what is being built, even right here in Arkansas, a place where C12 is really finding its legs and really growing. And so if you're in Arkansas, Dee is a great person to get in touch with, and you can find him on LinkedIn. And then, like you said, join C12 if you're looking for other forums that might be in your area if you're outside of Arkansas. But I really, really appreciate your time, Dee. Thank you so much for being part of this. Any kind of parting comments or anything before we wrap up?
I just want to say thanks for what you're doing to give encouragement to faith leaders all across the spectrum, and the encouragement that comes with that. Your book's out there everywhere on prayer related to business work and things. So thanks for your servant leadership.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Dee. I appreciate it. You have a great day.
All right. Bye now.
As we wrap up, I hope you enjoyed today's conversation. Please visit servantleadernetwork.org to find more helpful resources for your leadership journey. And as always, don't forget to bring your water walking shoes.